As speculations over the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal continue to mount, Israel has now said that the head of its Mossad spy agency will now visit the United States for talks on the latest developments in the high-stakes accord. According to reports, Israel's Mossad chief, David Barnea, will visit Washington in early September and will participate in closed-doors meetings in Congress. Now, the announced visit is the latest in the Jewish state's push to sway Western powers from signing a new deal with Tehran. Israel says that a new deal would facilitate the funding of Iran-supported extremists in the region and will not be able to prevent Tehran from developing a nuclear weapon. Iran, who has time and again denied Israel's claim, says that its nuclear program is completely safe. Meanwhile, a senior Iranian lawmaker has said that Iran and the world powers are close to a deal, but it may require a new round of meetings before something is finalized. The development comes as the US has now given its response to Tehran's views on European Union's final text proposal. As Iran and the six world powers inch closer to a new deal, reports have now surfaced divulging more details on the EU's final proposal. According to these reports, the EU draft that was proposed earlier this month included 4 crucial steps in halting of Iran's nuclear activity, with the fourth and the final step taking effect in nearly 165 days after the deal is signed and before any agreement is finalized. Now, the sides will reportedly greenlight a deal that will see Western prisoners freed by Tehran in exchange for Iranian assets being unfrozen by Western nations. The first step that will take effect from the day of signing would see Iran freeze its uranium enrichment. Tehran will, however, be allowed to hold on to the enriched uranium it will have stockpiled before that date. The second step would take 30 days. It will see the Biden administration bring the deal to Congress for approval. Third step, which will be 60 days after congressional approval, would see Washington notify the UN Security Council and the International Atomic Energy Agency about its decision to rejoin the pact. And the final step, which will come another 60 days later, would see the US formally return to the deal. Now, Iran signed the nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, with the US, China, Russia, Britain, France, and Germany in 2015. However, former US President Donald Trump pulled Washington out of the agreement in 2018 and reimposed sanctions on Tehran. The talks on the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal began in April last year, but were frequently suspended due to a rise in political differences between Washington and Tehran. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Jody Cohen is joining us from Ra'anana. Hello to you, Jody. Now, what does the draft report say and mean, the contentious bit for Israel or generally?
So I think it's important to say, Alison, that this is an Israeli media that's reported on the EU proposal to Iran. And of course, we know that Iran and the US have both commented on that draft since. So this isn't the final deal that's expected, but does certainly give an indication of what could be expected. Now, importantly, before the deal is signed, one of the points of contention would be that Iranian assets would be unfrozen by Western nations and Iran would be given initial sanctions relief. And indeed, as you said, in the first stage of this deal that's been proposed, Iran would freeze its uranium enrichment, but would get to keep its existing stockpiles. Other problems that Israel has cited with this deal is that it would be giving, in effect, Iran $100 billion a year, they say, to fund its terror activities. But the deal expires in less than 2 years, so it's not the longer, stronger deal that had been promised. Some people are saying that it does buy more time for countries to come up with other options, most notably a military option. However, the consensus is that this deal, as it stands, would enable Iran to not only to get nuclear weapons, but the deal would actually fund those efforts. and it would in fact encourage nuclear proliferation across West Asia and might even lead to war, which of course are the things that the deal is designed to try to prevent.
Right, Jody, and we see the Mossad spy chief's visit after Benny Gantz's visit. What is the idea here? This is Israel's pushback, and domestically, could it be Lapid versus Netanyahu's spat on closing of the deal with an eye on the polls as well?
So Mossad chief David Barnea has called it a bad deal and is going to be traveling to the US next week. And this follows Defense Minister Gantz and National Security Advisor Eyal Hulata's visit to the US last week. And this is seen as part of united efforts to try and influence the deal. Lapid is saying that he also wants a meeting with Biden. Perhaps this might come on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly that's coming up. He says that he wants the US to show a credible military threat to get a better deal. And he said that actually that's what happened last time and got Iran to sign that deal. He's talking about a later end date for the deal, a minimum amount of funds released through lifted sanctions, tighter supervision, and he'd like the deal also to address Iran's long-range ballistic missile program and, quotes, the involvement in terrorism across West Asia. Now, in terms of the election coming up, that is obviously a key factor. We've seen that former Prime Minister Netanyahu and current Prime Minister Lapid have been criticizing each other's handling of the deal negotiations. However, at the end of the day, they do agree that this is what they consider to be a bad deal and, in fact, an existential threat to Israel and indeed to other countries as well. And they will be having a security briefing today on Monday, where they will be focusing on Iran.
Right. Jody, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.